The first memory I want to share is not about fame or money. It is about silence. The kind of silence that happens after life hits you so hard, you don't even have words left. Years ago, I thought I had everything under control. Movies were going well, people knew my name, and the future seemed open. But life does not ask if you are ready before it tests you. Tragedy comes like a storm in the middle of a calm night. The first storm came when I lost my father. People think when you are grown up, losing a parent is somehow easier. It is not. It breaks something inside you. I remember the hospital hallway, the smell of antiseptic, the dim light above my head. I remember sitting down on a cold bench, staring at the floor tiles, asking myself, what do I do now? There were no answers. I thought I was strong, but in that moment I was just a child again, feeling powerless. Grief is strange. People come to comfort you, but their words pass like wind. Inside, you are in another world, one where time moves slowly. I tried to work through it, but every scene, every line, every camera flash reminded me that no spotlight can fill the emptiness left by someone you love. Then, just when I was learning to walk again after that loss, life struck with a second storm. My closest friend, someone who knew me better than most, passed away suddenly. It was not expected and it was not fair. I remember getting the call and feeling like the ground beneath me was opening. One second you are laughing with a friend, the next second you are staring at silence on the other end of the line. In those days, I learned that grief does not come alone. It brings questions. Why now? Why them? Why not me? These questions circle around your head at night when everyone else is asleep. They don't bring answers, only exhaustion. People saw me smiling in interviews, but behind the smile was a man carrying 2 heavy stones in his heart. Every day was about survival. Get up, breathe, work, pretend, repeat. Then came the third storm, the one that almost finished me. I won't share every detail yet, but it was the kind of tragedy that tears your future into pieces. You think you have plans, but life reminds you that plans are fragile. One accident, one moment, and everything changes. At that point, I thought I was done. I felt empty, like I had nothing left to give. I walked through streets at night unnoticed, like a ghost. People around me were laughing, living, moving forward, and I was stuck in a dark room inside my mind. But here is the twist. In that silence, in that darkness, I found something I had never seen before. It was not loud. It was not grand. It was a small, quiet truth. Life is not about avoiding storms. It is about learning to walk in the rain. Someone once sat next to me on a park bench, an old man feeding pigeons. He said, "Son, you cannot choose what life takes from you, but you can choose what you give back." I didn't know why his words mattered then, but over time, they became the first candle in my dark room, and that was the beginning of my slow return. Not because I was strong, but because even in pain, kindness still existed. And sometimes, the smallest act of kindness is enough to remind you that you are still alive. This is just the start of my journey. In the next part, I will share what happened when I decided to stop hiding from the world, and how unexpected moments gave me new strength to live. When people look at you from the outside, they often believe the story is simple. They see the actor on screen, the smile on a red carpet, the applause that comes at the end of a premiere. They imagine life must be easy, perfect, without cracks. But what they do not see is how a broken heart walks quietly behind that smile. After the third tragedy, I carried a shadow with me everywhere. It was not just sadness. It was a weight that made every day feel like walking uphill with no rest. I avoided crowded places, avoided people who asked too many questions, and even avoided mirrors because I did not like what looked back at me. But then, something unusual happened. One night, I sat in a small coffee shop in the corner of the city. No one recognized me there, and that gave me peace. As I sipped my coffee, a young woman came in with a little boy. He was maybe 7 or 8, thin and quiet, holding her hand tightly. I noticed him staring at the pastries behind the glass. His eyes filled with the longing that only children have. But when his mother checked her purse, I saw the truth. She didn't have enough. I don't know why, but my heart moved in that moment. I stood up, went to the counter, and asked the cashier to add whatever the boy wanted to my bill. I didn't say it out loud to them, didn't want thanks or attention. When the boy finally held his pastry in his hands, his face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in years. He smiled like the whole world was safe again. That smile touched something in me. It was as if life whispered, "See, even after pain, light exists." I walked out of the shop before they could thank me, but inside something shifted. For the first time in months, I felt that I still had something to give. Small acts like that became my therapy. I would help quietly, without announcing it. Sometimes it was giving my seat on a bus, sometimes it was paying for someone's meal when they didn't notice. Each act reminded me that while I had lost much, I was not empty. I still had kindness to offer. But healing is not a straight path. One night I found myself at a party surrounded by people, music, and laughter. Everyone seemed happy, but I felt more alone than ever. It was strange. How could you feel invisible in a room full of people calling your name? I excused myself, walked outside, and sat on the steps under the cold night sky. There was a security guard nearby, an older man. He looked at me for a while, then walked over and asked, "Rough night?" I nodded. He told me about his daughter who had been sick for years and how he worked double shifts to pay her hospital bills. I asked him how he found the strength, and he said something I never forgot. Strength is not about feeling strong. It is about showing up even when you feel weak. Those words became a kind of anchor for me. I realized I didn't have to wait for pain to leave before living again. I could live while carrying the pain step by step. Still, not everyone understood. Some people thought I was strange, too quiet, too serious. I was often judged for being different, for not living the way others expected. But grief had changed me. It stripped away the noise and left only what was real. Sometimes at night, I would walk alone through the streets and see people rushing, chasing, arguing over things that didn't matter. I thought to myself, if only they knew how fragile life is, maybe they would treat each other differently. Maybe they would choose kindness first, instead of anger or pride. What kept me moving forward were those little moments of human connection. A stranger holding the door for me. A child waving at me in traffic. A friend calling just to say hello. Small things that reminded me that no matter how dark life feels, it is never completely dark. One day, I decided to visit a children's hospital quietly. No cameras, no announcements. I just walked into a ward where kids were fighting illnesses far bigger than themselves. They laughed, they played with toys, they asked me questions about movies. And I thought, how can children who are in pain still find a way to smile, while I, a grown man, had been drowning in silence? Their courage humbled me. One little girl with a shaved head from treatment told me, "Don't be sad. Life is short, but we can still make it sweet." Her words were like a mirror, showing me the truth I had been avoiding. That day, I walked out of the hospital with tears in my eyes, but also with a decision in my heart. If children who face death can choose joy, then so can I. Maybe I could never erase the tragedies I faced, but I could choose what kind of man I would be after them. And so, I began to rebuild, not by chasing fame or money, but by chasing moments of meaning. I started to live slower, to notice more, to value the people around me. But life was not done testing me. As I began to stand again, a new twist came, one that pushed me into another unexpected chapter. And in that moment, I had to decide if I would let the weight crush me again, or if I would rise with the lessons I had learned. There comes a moment in every life when the past and the future stand face to face and you feel trapped in between them. The past whispers your pain. The future hides its secrets, and the present feels too heavy to carry. That was where I stood. I had begun to understand kindness, begun to notice the small lights around me, but inside me there was still a storm that had not passed. One evening, I was walking home from a late shoot. The streets were mostly empty, the city lights flickered, and the night air was cold. I saw a man sitting on the sidewalk holding a cardboard sign. It simply read, "Hungry." People passed by quickly, their eyes avoiding him. I stopped. For a long moment, I just stood there, staring at him, and something inside me broke open. I walked into a small diner nearby, bought a warm meal, and handed it to him. He looked up at me, his hands shaking as he whispered, "Thank you." But then he added something that pierced my heart. "You didn't look away." I realized then that sometimes the worst pain is not hunger or cold, it is being unseen. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how many people walk invisible among us, carrying silent battles. Grief had made me invisible once, too, but now I knew how much it hurts to be ignored. From then on, I made a quiet promise. I would not look away anymore. But promises are tested. Soon after, I faced a challenge that shook me deeply. I was offered a major film role, one that could bring me back into the center of Hollywood fame. Everyone around me told me to take it. They said it was the chance of a lifetime. But when I read the script, I felt nothing. It was loud, flashy, but empty. My heart told me I could not pretend anymore. I turned it down. People thought I was crazy. They said I was wasting opportunities, letting go of money, destroying my career. Some even mocked me, calling me too serious, too broken, or too lost. But I stayed silent, because I knew something they didn't. When you have survived loss, money and fame lose their shine. What matters is meaning, and meaning was missing from that role. Instead, I started spending my free time with people who had nothing to do with the film industry. Artists, teachers, mechanics, people who carried real struggles every day. I listened to their stories. And every story reminded me that resilience is not built on red carpets. It is built in kitchens where parents count coins for rent, in hospitals where families wait in fear, in small rooms where dreams refuse to die. One man I met was a bus driver. He worked long shifts and barely earned enough, but every morning he kept a notebook of little poems he wrote while waiting at stops. When I asked him why he did it, he smiled and said, "Because the world is heavy, and poems make it lighter." I carried that line with me like a treasure. Then came another turning point. I received a letter from a fan, a teenager who said my old movies had given him strength during his battle with depression. He wrote, "I felt like you understood my silence and it made me feel less alone." I held that letter in my hands for a long time, tears falling onto the paper. I realized that maybe my life, with all its scars, could serve a purpose greater than myself. So I began speaking to people, not in big speeches, but in small, personal ways. I shared little pieces of my journey, how pain had nearly broken me, how kindness had saved me. I wanted others to know that they were not alone, that even in their darkest nights, there were stars hidden somewhere above. But as I slowly opened my heart again, the world brought me another test. I was riding my motorcycle one night when a reckless driver swerved in front of me. I managed to stop in time, but I watched as another car collided with him, leaving the road covered in chaos and screams. I rushed to help, pulling a young man from the wreck. He was trembling, crying, whispering, "I don't want to die." In that moment, all my tragedies came back to me, the hospital, the phone calls, the losses. I held his hand and said, "You are not alone. Just breathe." We waited until the ambulance arrived and he survived, but the experience shook me to the core. Once again, life had shown me how fragile everything is. That night, sitting alone in my apartment, I realized something powerful. I had survived 3 tragedies, yes, but maybe I had survived them for a reason, not just to live, but to help others carry their storms too. So I made another choice. I would no longer run from my pain. I would use it. I would let my story be a bridge for anyone standing in silence, anyone thinking they cannot go on. I did not know how yet, but I knew this. Life had given me wounds, and I would turn them into windows. Still, life had more chapters waiting. As I took my first steps into this new way of living, a shocking twist came, one that forced me to face not only my pain, but also the question of whether I truly believed the lessons I spoke. Sometimes life tests you in ways that feel almost cruel, as if it is asking, "Do you really believe what you say? Or are they only words?" I had been learning to find meaning in pain, learning to see light in small acts of kindness, but soon a moment came that pushed me back into the fire. It started quietly with a phone call. A close friend of mine had been in an accident. I rushed to the hospital, my heart racing, my mind praying. When I arrived, the familiar smell of antiseptic and the echo of hurried footsteps dragged me back to memories I thought I had buried. I stood outside the emergency room, watching the doors swing open and shut, feeling that old helplessness rise again. Doctors moved quickly, machines beeped, nurses whispered. I sat in the hallway with my head in my hands, thinking, "Not again, please, not again." I remembered all the losses before, all the nights of grief, all the times I had promised myself I would not break, and yet here I was, trembling. Hours later, the doctor came out. My friend had survived, but the recovery would be long and painful. I felt both relief and sorrow at the same time. I walked into the room, saw my friend lying there, weak but breathing, and something inside me shifted. I realized that life will always keep reminding us of its fragility, but what matters is what we do with the time we are given. After that, I began to spend more time in hospitals, not only for my friend, but also for others. I would sit with families who were waiting, bring coffee to nurses, talk with patients who had no visitors. One man, an elderly patient with tired eyes, told me, "The hardest part of illness is not the pain. It is being forgotten." His words stayed with me like fire on my skin. I started to ask myself, how many people live every day feeling forgotten? How many walk through life carrying pain no one notices? And I realized I had been one of them once. Maybe that is why I understood so well, but the test grew deeper. One night, I was invited to an award ceremony. Bright lights, cameras flashing, people dressed in glitter and gold. They called my name. The crowd applauded, and I walked onto the stage. In my hands, they placed a trophy. Everyone expected a speech about success, about fame, about achievement. But as I looked at the shining object in my hands, I felt nothing. Instead, what came to my mind were the faces in the hospital, the boy in the coffee shop, the bus driver writing poems. I thought of all the invisible people whose courage was never seen, whose kindness was never awarded. And suddenly, the trophy felt heavy in the wrong way. When I stepped up to the microphone, the hall went silent. I said, "This doesn't belong to me." It belongs to every person who chooses kindness even when life gives them pain. It belongs to the unseen, the forgotten, the ones who wake up every day and still show love. The audience froze. Some clapped politely, some looked confused, but I did not care. I placed the trophy on the edge of the stage and walked away. People later said it was strange, even foolish. But for me, it was freedom. That moment taught me something powerful. Recognition is not the goal. Living with meaning is, and meaning often lives in quiet places where no cameras go. After that, I became even more private. I would still work, still create, but my true energy went into small human moments. I started to ride the subway more, sit on benches, talk with strangers. I learned to listen, really listen. Every person carried a story, and in those stories I found pieces of myself. One evening I met a young man on the train. He looked tired, carrying a worn backpack. We started talking, and he told me he had been working 2 jobs while studying at night, just to take care of his younger siblings. I asked him how he managed it, and he smiled softly, saying, "Because they need me, and when someone needs you, you find strength." His words struck me deeply. I thought back to my own life, the people who once needed me, and how even in my darkest times, their memory kept me going. But life was not done with its lessons. A few weeks later, I received another letter. This one was from a woman who said she had lost her husband and felt she had no reason to live. She wrote that hearing me speak about surviving pain gave her hope to keep moving. I sat with that letter for hours, tears blurring the words. I realized that sharing my story, even in small pieces, could save lives I might never meet, and yet, with every new connection, every new reminder of meaning, the shadows of my own tragedies never fully left. They still whispered at night, still returned in dreams, still tested my heart. I began to see that healing is not about erasing pain. It is about carrying it with dignity and still choosing love in the middle of it. But then came the moment I never expected, the one that tested all of this. I was asked to visit a community struck by disaster, a place where homes had been destroyed and families were living in shelters. As I walked among the ruins, listening to their stories, I felt both humbled and shaken. They had lost everything, yet many of them still smiled, still shared food, still helped each other, standing there, surrounded by resilience. I asked myself, could I truly live by the same strength I admired in them? Could I take the lessons of my own survival and turn them into something greater than myself? The answer was waiting just around the corner, in a way I never could have predicted. Life has a way of placing you in front of mirrors you did not ask for. Some mirrors are made of glass, others of people, others of events that shake the ground beneath you. When I visited that community destroyed by disaster, I thought I would simply offer support. I thought I would be the one giving. But in truth, I was the one being given a lesson. I remember stepping into a shelter that smelled of smoke and dust. Families were packed into small corners, their faces carrying both exhaustion and courage. Children played with scraps of cardboard, drawing smiles on them as if to remind the world that joy cannot be buried under rubble. One little boy walked up to me with a toy car, its wheels broken, and said, "It doesn't go anymore, but it's still mine." Those words pierced through me. In his broken toy, I saw my own broken life. And yet the pride in his voice taught me something about holding on to what remains instead of drowning in what is lost. I sat with mothers who had lost homes, with fathers who had lost jobs, and still, they spoke more about hope than despair. One woman, holding her baby tightly, told me, "We will build again. We always do." I looked at her and thought, this is resilience, not the kind shown on screens, but the kind built in fire and ashes. That night, I lay on a thin mattress in the shelter, surrounded by strangers who had welcomed me as one of their own. I listened to the sound of quiet breathing, the occasional cough, the whispers of people making plans even in the middle of loss. And I thought, maybe survival is not about what we escape from, but about what we build together afterward. But the test did not end there. The next morning, a young girl approached me shyly. She had wide eyes, her hair messy from the dust. She handed me a piece of paper with shaky handwriting. It said, "Thank you for not forgetting us." I felt tears rise in my throat. I had come to that place thinking I would give comfort. But in truth, I was the one being healed by their strength. Still, when I returned to my own life, something inside me refused to settle back into the routine. The flashing lights, the interviews, the shallow questions about fame, they felt emptier than ever. People asked about my next big project, my next film, my next achievement. But all I could think about was that boy with the broken toy car and that girl with the note. So I made a choice. I began to step back from the noise and spend more time in silence. I traveled quietly, without announcement, to places where people were struggling. I visited food banks, shelters, schools with broken roofs. I did not go there as the actor, but as a human being trying to listen. And with each visit, I found myself changing. I learned that resilience is not a single event. It is a rhythm. People rise, they fall, they rise again. Sometimes they cry while rising. Sometimes they laugh while falling, but always they continue. And I realized that this was the story of my own life, too. 3 tragedies had nearly broken me, but each time I stood again, even if shaking. And in that shaking, I discovered that strength is not the absence of weakness. It is the decision to move even when weak. One evening, I had dinner with an old friend who asked me a question that cut deep. "Do you ever wish you could erase the past?" I sat in silence for a long time before answering. Once I would have said yes. I would have given anything to undo the losses, to escape the pain. But now, after all these years, I told him, no, I don't want to erase it, because it shaped the way I love, the way I respect, the way I live. Without those scars, I would not see the world the way I do. But even as I said those words, I knew life was preparing another challenge, one that would not come from loss, but from choice. A charity group reached out to me, asking if I would help them raise awareness for children living in poverty. At first, I thought it would just be a donation, a name attached to a campaign. But when I met those children face to face, I knew it could not be that simple. They didn't need my name, they needed my presence, my voice, my time. I began working with them quietly, helping schools, supporting programs. But as more people found out, critics started to speak. Some said I was doing it for publicity. Others mocked, saying one man cannot change anything. Their words stung. Not because I believed them, but because they reminded me how quick the world is to doubt kindness for a moment. I felt the old darkness return, the temptation to withdraw, to disappear again. But then I remembered the girl's note. "Thank you for not forgetting us." I realized that walking away because of criticism would be the same as forgetting. So I chose to stay. And yet staying came with its own test. One day, while speaking to a group of children, a boy asked me, "Why do bad things happen to good people?" His eyes were serious, and his voice carried the weight of someone who had seen too much. I froze. How do you answer a question you yourself have asked countless times? I took a deep breath and told him the truth. I don't know why, but I do know this. Bad things don't decide who you are. How you live after them does. He nodded quietly, and I could see that even without answers, honesty itself gave him strength. That night, I thought about how many times I had searched for answers and found none. Maybe life is not about answers at all. Maybe it is about choices. The choice to love when it's easier to hate. The choice to stand when it's easier to fall. The choice to give when it's easier to take. And yet, just when I thought I had begun to understand, life placed me on the edge of another storm. A storm not of loss, but of revelation. One that would connect all my past tragedies and force me to face a truth I had been running from all along. Life always keeps one last card hidden, and it often reveals it when you least expect it. After years of surviving tragedies, after learning to see meaning in pain, I thought I had reached the end of the lesson. But life was not finished with me yet. It had one more mirror to place before me, one more truth to unfold. It happened on a quiet evening. I was invited to speak at a small community hall. Nothing grand, no cameras, just a gathering of people who had faced their own storms. Survivors of accidents, people who had lost loved ones, parents raising children alone, young ones fighting illnesses. I sat in the back before my turn, listening to their stories, and I felt humbled. Each one carried scars deeper than mine, yet they were sitting there choosing to live. When my name was called, I walked to the front slowly. I looked at the faces before me and realized I had nothing scripted, nothing polished to say. I simply began with the truth. I survived 3 tragedies, I told them. Each one took something from me. Each one nearly broke me. But I learned something that I want to share with you tonight. Life is not fair, but it can still be beautiful. Pain will visit, but it does not have to stay as your master. The world may take from you, but you can still choose what you give back. The hall was silent. Then a man in the front row stood up. His voice was shaking as he said, "You just told my story too." One by one, others stood, nodding, some with tears, some with trembling hands. I realized then that my pain was not only mine, it was a language spoken by many. And when shared, it became less heavy. But the most powerful moment came at the end. A little girl, no older than 10, walked up to me with a small notebook. She said, "I wrote something for you." I opened it. Inside, in crooked handwriting, were the words, "Thank you for showing me that broken people can still shine." I could not hold back my tears. I knelt down, hugged her, and whispered, "We are all broken, but together we make light." That night, when I walked out of the hall, I finally understood why I had survived. Not to return to who I was before, but to become someone new, someone who could use his scars as maps for others. The tragedies had taken people I loved, had shaken my world, had left me scarred. But they had also taught me humility, respect, resilience, and kindness. They showed me that strength is not about standing tall without wounds, but about standing at all with wounds still bleeding. In the years since, I have lived quieter but not smaller. I have found joy in simple things, sharing a meal with strangers, listening to stories, offering help where I can. I have stopped searching for answers to why pain comes and instead learned to ask, how can I turn this pain into something meaningful? And so here is what I leave you with. You will face storms. You will lose things you thought you could not live without. You will be broken in ways you never imagined. But you will also find kindness where you least expect it. You will discover strength inside yourself you never knew you had. And if you choose it, your scars will not only be marks of pain, they will be marks of survival, of growth, of love. I survived 3 tragedies. What I learned is simple. Life is fragile, but kindness is powerful. And no matter how broken you feel, you are never truly alone.